The conversation we were just having prior to starting the recording has me thinking about the biggest blunder of your professional or amateur career. And so, Ronnie, I want to know. I'll give you a second to think, and I'll share with you mine. Most of our listening audience has heard me talk before about my career on the marketing side in professional sports prior to coming into the nonprofit marketing space, and I think there are two that come to mind, but the one that physically was biggest was when I had a 40-foot tall banner produced and put up on the exterior of a stadium that had a typo in the name of the team captain, and it became a bigger blunder because the team was like watching the banner put up, and so there's this big reveal.
Yeah. I had two
Wasn't good.
similar to that. One for a new client, and ironically, it was a university president. He was an old friend, and we gave him a middle initial he didn't have on the first letter to his president's circle mailing. So that was memorable.
What
Getting the
middle
call.
initial? Like, was it? I mean, was there just like you threw a random Q?
Well, he didn't have a middle initial. He just had it was Clyde Cook, the wonderful president of Biola University and high school player of the year in California in basketball back in the day, and a POW, civilian POW during World War II. I could go on about Clyde. What a great man. But yeah, we assigned that. The other memorable one was printing 110,000 maybe 4-color wall calendars, uniquely with 31 days in June.
Wasn't a problem until July rolled around.
Well, yeah, I mean, who's noticing those things? But it's one of those things. How did it go through all the sign-offs and get there? But it did.
Yeah. Ronnie, what about you?
Yeah, I think mine, the one that comes to mind for me was my first newspaper job. I was working in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and we were doing kind of a series on the sports desk on former players, who had been like stars there and what they've gone on to do since then. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a basketball player, and I did the feature, talked to him and everything, and he had done a tryout recently with the Sacramento Kings, and he said that he had gotten a 10-day contract with them. And in my immature, brash youth, I just took him at his word and never double checked it. And it went to print on that. Sacramento Kings called and contacted us and said, we don't have a guy by that name on here. And I was mortified. And, the managing editor called me into his office, and I sat down and just said, all right, let's just get this over with. Fully sure I was getting fired. And he said, no, it's just, it's a lesson to be learned here. Always double check your facts and always, do your research. And so certainly a lesson learned. And for the longest time, it's probably around here somewhere, I had a letter that the Kings had sent about that, printed and framed to remind me of that.
A reminder. Yeah.
Well, it strikes me if you're in Mississippi and you're looking for a safe sports story, just do something on Brett Favre. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there's a handful of folks that are.
Plenty.
Yeah, the way that I had to reconcile the blunder once I talked to my boss at the time, she said, "Well, you got to go talk to Coach because he's, and so the coach was a very solemn man, and that quietness was actually fearful. Like it created more angst and
made it worse.
And his response was, well, you got to go talk to Danielle, the captain. And that's whenever I felt, tiny and the weight of it. And I
Yeah.
think I was more concerned that that he was going to, throw me through the wall than relieve me of my duties, so to speak. So, but to your point, like you learn the lessons from it, and he and I are even contacts today and trade messages every once in a while, and
Well,
haven't
that's
misspelled
fun.
the name since. So I guess
Well,
that's
yeah, if
that.
you'd have spelled it right, you probably would have lost touch. So,
That's true. Yeah, yeah. Welcome to Group Thinkers, everyone. The podcast from Arcade Group, and on each and every episode, we have a conversation with someone in the nonprofit marketing space who is doing something differently, has done something differently, and currently we're in a series of talking to people about their experiences and conversations with leaders and leadership conversations. And I'm really excited to welcome today's guest because I consider him to be a leader of many of my leaders and someone who has helped set a tone for the work that we all do. And so I want to explore some of that. So welcome Jim Killion, CEO of Digizent International, to Group
thank
Thinkers.
you, Justin. Thank you. It's fun to be with friends, old friends, and I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, we are equally, and so this is going to be a great conversation. We're excited to dig into it. I think it's appropriate to bridge from those blunder experiences to just talk about experiences overall. And
I would
I
like to get
would.
out of the blenders. Yeah, I would feel good about that.
Hey, listen, if we want to stay there, it might get a little mucky, but that's okay. I'm curious, as you reflect on your career, what experiences have most shaped you as a leader?
Well, quite seriously, I think we do learn more from our blunders, or hopefully they're not all quite that dramatic, maybe mistakes. But I think of some of those, but mostly I think about people and experiences that have had an impact on my life. One that just really kind of snuck up on me at the time. I was inside a nonprofit leading a growing team, mostly creatives, and a chance to go to a conference on managing creative people, leading creative people. And it turned out, I was just in my early 30s, and it turned out that some of the early top leadership at Bain were leading this multi-day seminar in it was in Colorado, in Boulder, excuse me, complete with a Chinook coming through at 100 and some odd miles an hour during the conference, and that leads to other stories. But it was an amazing trio of leaders at that conference, and they really planted some seeds about the importance of communication, not looking at people monolithically, and giving people space to be who they are and to achieve. One of the guys was a fellow named Ray Foltz, and just to show the age, look at the font on that book
That's a
cover.
great looking
It's
font.
fine. I mean, this is an old book. And one of the things he said early on in the book, I just pulled it off the shelf and had highlighted it way back when. And he said, it's no doubt in my mind that organizations that remember people's innate desire to participate, understand, and contribute, if you remember those desires and all you plan and do, that your organization will be at the top of the heap in 1980. That's 43 years ago, guys. And why did he say that? He said, it's not beyond possibility that people-centered organizations will be the only ones in existence.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. People-focused organizations. At Digizent, our main value is people are most important. And that you got to live that. That's hard. The second one would be reading, again, back in the day, Max Dupree's classic, Leadership is an Art, and Leadership Jazz that follows it up as well. But so many fantastic things there. And then there was another book that really stuck out, and it was Peter Drucker, who's sage-like. I mean, who else do you know that had tea with the Freuds in Vienna other than Peter Drucker?
Right.
So being around Peter
He's kind of the Yoda the Yoda of the management space.
Yeah, I mean, he started with, the landmark study of management at GM, General Motors, back in the late 30s. And so here's a book he wrote in 1999. He was looking to this current century. And he said something that he said an increasing number of people who are full-time employees have to be managed as if they were volunteers. They're paid to be sure, but knowledge workers have mobility. They can leave. They are their own quote unquote means of production, which is their knowledge. And boy, that just rocked my world back then. I like to think I was living consistently with that because we're in a service business. RKD is all about serving non-for-profits and helping them reach their goals. And you do it brilliantly, by the way. But in a sense, if you work at a nonprofit, you're a volunteer, have a volunteer mentality, either formally or informally. And now we are staffed by this army of knowledge workers, and they're not hooked to an assembly line at a GM plant in the 1930s. It's up here and it's in here, and they can go and do. So anyway, those are just three of the kind of big ideas among many exposures. And when I was younger and not quite as young with that last one from Drucker, but really stewed on those things and said, what does this look like in my life? What does it look like in my company? What does it look like in my relationships? And
so as a leader, and you've been a leader of, at multiple different stops that we're going to touch on. And I know you as a reader, and as evidenced obviously by the examples that you've just cited. What do you do with that when you find something that you highlight, that you stop down, something that rocks your world? How do you then channel that into the way that you relate to your teams?
Well, two things. One, I'm thrilled that now most of my new books are on Kindle, so it's easier to highlight and save and retrieve and search.
Right.
So these are relics from that previous era. But that's a great question, Justin, and it's not automatic. I think what becomes critical is identifying the big ideas, saying this is worth thinking about. And if it's worth thinking about, then it's probably worth applying, either positively or negatively. And you start, I just work it through in my mind. I mean, I had a fourth grade teacher that said to me, Jimmy, your problem is you think too much. Well, I kind of haven't gotten over that. And yet we've got to wed thoughts, feelings, and actions. Or people say we're hypocritical. People say Jim says do this, but he does that. On and on. So it becomes a discipline. But I'm one of those who really believes that it's not just a mental concept that is unrelated to behavior, but there's a way to weather. That's the challenge, is bring them together and then explore those ideas. You've got to have key people around you where, we can't do this alone. What do you think about? Again, going back to the K at RKD, Tim Kirsten and I used to go to lunch a couple of times a week. We worked together first nearly half a century ago. Oh my goodness. And we just had significant conversations. Iron sharpens iron. And hey, what do you think about, or trying to work this out, or what do you think we should, and so you're constantly looking for people that make you better. If you hire beneath you, because you've always got to be the best and you always got to get the attention, you'll have a mediocre organization. But if you have those gifted people who go beyond you and have gifts you don't have, suddenly the discussions, I had one this morning with two of my key leaders, it's life-changing.
Jim, I've often heard it said that a good leader knows their weaknesses and surrounds themselves with people who, fill those gaps and isn't afraid to say, I don't know this. You do, you handle that. I wanted to kind of looking through your career a little bit, going back almost to the beginning, to your college days. I was kind of noticing you got
Millard Fillmore was president in those days.
I noticed you got a history degree at USC and then a master's in theology. At the time, were you intending to go, did you kind of see your path, your career path in religious ministry, or were you heading that in that direction, and kind of what changed course and made you, led to you getting into nonprofit work and things like that?
Great question. I started out as pre-den at USC, and then when I had some experiences that really caught my attention. I worked on a Native American reservation in Nevada one summer, and it was painful to see what we had officially done to people, and a sense of compassion and need for change. That really got my attention. The guy leading the group was a fellow, he had graduated from USC. We were 4 years apart. He went on to Dallas Seminary. That was a big influence. But you hear the University of Southern California, most people think it's a state school. It's a private school. And so I had courses in Old Testament by design. It wasn't required. Old Testament, New Testament. Fascinating course in intertestamental literature and history from a Jewish rabbi in Beverly Hills. And then a biblical archaeology course. And they were all coming, perhaps except the rabbi, all coming from a very different viewpoint than mine. And it was really, instead of really embracing the faith, there were fairly strident attacks. So I went to seminary in part to, are there answers to these things, or am I going to base my life with this conviction on something that doesn't stand up to intellectual scrutiny and is hooey? I thought I had planned to go into a ministry that dealt with youth, and because I going all the way back to that reservation experience, again, just seeing kids are making life choices that are so critical. Can I help them with that? But I didn't feel like I didn't have alternatives. I did work 1 year in a church after I graduated. I was on the staff of the seminary, then 1 year gone. At that time, I nearly died from a rare disease. I was paralyzed, got pneumonia. I knew I was dying. Doctors knew I was dying. Miraculously, I lived. I hate to get that punchline away, but I am alive. Well, I still have some facial paralysis, but then I couldn't say the letter P or B because you need your lower lip to hold up vertically, or you can't say P like that. So now here I'm trained to speak and teach, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. And on top of that, I realized working we were in a church of 1,200 adults in a community of 7,900, Derry Township, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Volunteer labor was just a struggle for me, to be honest with you. And so rather than please people, which I normally would have perhaps done to a fault, after 1 year I came back and got engaged back again in fundraising and communication. Again, I could do that in a written way, and I didn't have to speak, and I didn't matter as much if my facial ability came back. So it was I don't know if it's a gradual turn, it's more of a sudden turn, but I clearly found my calling. I got really comfortable. And when you're in a graduate school, and it was the second largest seminary in the world at that point, all these academics around you. My best friend, double doctorate from Cambridge on the faculty, very stimulating conversations. I put together real philosophy and even theology, if you will, of philanthropy. It's a great place to do that when you're young. And whether I'm working for faith-based organizations or not, I still kind of lean back on some principles there that were forged. So it turned out to be an unanticipated benefit.
And that took you through time both at Dallas Theological Seminary and where you were honing your communication skills and your fundraising skills, and then 1981.
Well, just before that, just an irony on that. Here I am. I'm not 35 years. I'm 34 years old. I'm on the 5-person administrative cabinet of the school with some faculty members that had been my profs. They weren't thrilled that I had gone to that point. And my profound thought was, I don't want to do this for 30 more years and get a cheap watch and retire. So I started looking for opportunities to help more organizations. And
well, and it would be too easy to say the rest is history, but the history is so rich, right? So
thank you.
The I would say that the next chapter in terms of your helping form Killion McCabe and Associates, KMA, and where you served in many roles, including CEO and Chief Creative Officer. I've got a couple things I want to ask you about it, but as you look back on that experience, what are some of the lessons that you learned from helping build such an influential institution in nonprofit marketing?
I learned a lot. First, I started by learning what I didn't know. In 1981, gosh, that feels like a different lifetime. There were 4 of us, 3.5 of us really, in a consulting firm that would grow into KMA. But everybody was kind of an independent contractor. Not really. We worked for the same company, but we had to do stem to stern. You flew to the client, you visited, you developed a strategy, you wrote the copy, you came home, you got it. Maybe you used an artist, maybe you did it yourself. You sent it to the printer yourself. You worked with a letter shop yourself, and it was like, this is crazy. We're not going to be able to scale. So I started visiting, getting all the advice I could, and networked into a guy who was executive VP of kind of the hot commercial shop in Dallas at the time. And he just kind of gave me a primer on how you put an agency together, because there just weren't models out there. So figuring that out was kind of the first thing. And as soon as you do that, you realize you've got to have systems, you got to have a way to manage workflow. You've got a lot of things to put together, and we were growing rapidly. So then you've got questions around, well, okay, what are keys to recruitment? And then if you can find the right people, now what? Obviously, it was, even then, it hit me, it's more than putting them in the right position. And even then, sometimes it was the wrong position. Yeah, coming around that, you have to develop, I think, a philosophy of hiring, mentoring, training, listening, because it's got to be 2 ways. If all I do is sit in the Lincoln Memorial next to Lincoln and pontificate, it's not going to work.
Right.
When we hire, we're not creating IQ. We're not creating life experiences. We're selecting maybe an educational background, but there's a whole lot that, how can I interview and say, Ronnie, based on everything you've told me about yourself, feels like we might have a fit here. And so you know, we did testing, we did a variety of things, but okay, so now Ronnie's here. Now what? Well, you say, Ronnie, here's what you're going to do, and you give a list. If it stops there, then you're going to probably frustrate the daylights out of Ronnie, and you're probably not going to be successful, because Ronnie needs tools that are consistent with our view of how things are done. And some of those, they're not all parochial. I mean, it could be like any agency does them. Others are more unique. But I would say, so you owe training, you owe systems that give a lingua franca to everyone working together. So it's not a fire drill. It's a team that, yeah, we're all moving the same direction, even though we're differences. We recognize specialists here, there, and the other, but going through all of that, and there are lots of layers that I've learned more and more about over the years. I think the critical thing is I've got to help you understand why and not just what. If you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be effective for clients over time, internal and external, you need to know why. If all you know is what, you're going to misapply the what's.
How big did KMA get? How many people, like at its heyday?
125.
That's a big shop, Jim. Did you find that how did the expression of the why change from 5 people to 125 people?
That's a great question. You know, and when starting Digizent many years later, I had learned something way back in the beginning of KMA. I stumbled on it. I observed it. And that is, if you can get the first 12 to 15 people right and build a philosophy, a vision, and help them understand the why, then you don't have top-down policing and hand-holding. They become self-enforcing, if you will, and they embrace the new people that come on, and they tell them, no, this is how we do things. They know why we do it that way. And so, you know, getting those first 12 to 15 right, really building in my experience, you hit 50 or so, and then the dynamic is changing again, because particularly with rapid growth, you've got challenges that are very, very different than the initial. At Digizent, we're about 65 now. Well, I think we did a pretty good job with the first 12 to 15, and they're working that out. But now with the growth we've had in the pandemic and post-pandemic, we've got a bunch of people that we're really concerned understand more about things. The other thing that I learned is, and each passing decade, you get hopefully a new opportunity to be better at it, because I didn't always handle this well. In fact, sometimes I handle it horribly. And that is, I am totally committed to a no blame culture. Now, a lot of people say that, but that is really hard to achieve, and you're always sort of battling for it. But placing blame and dealing with it takes time and energy out of the organization. It also means that I'm going to be less likely to help you, Justin, because I might be blamed for something you do. And so I go in and help you, and now we're both in trouble. No, thank you. I'm just going to stay in my own. Well, you don't get as much work done. You don't get the synergy again of those other people that have skills you don't have. And so by the time we've gotten to Digizent, we're just militant about that. And people come in and they, you know, yeah, I've been in an agency where I kind of got beaten up. We'll see. And
Yeah, I mean, but honestly, Jim, I appreciate you calling that out. I don't know if I've ever, I know I've never heard you express it, but you know, we've known each other now almost a dozen years, and early in our relationship, we worked on some, I mean, albatrosses of projects, and it would be so easy. It would be so easy to fall into, well, if Jim would have done this, well, if Justin would have done this, like those sorts of things, and that's definitely a hallmark that you carry.
Thank you. I mean, it's, you know, I blow it at times. I'm not, perfectly consistent, but we really work hard at that.
Hmm.
And it's amazing how much time you save. It's amazing how much better work gets done. People will say, how in the world in peak season do you turn 200 tasks in a day? You have to work together
Yeah,
or you're not gonna do it.
yeah, yeah. Um, Golly, it's so interesting to hear you talk about the people aspect, and it goes back to one of the things I said at the beginning, and it's because uh, I have been blessed and shaped by so many people whose lives you have had an impact on. And so
Thank you.
it's fun to be in a kind of in an indirect way of the tree of Killian. And in fact, Jim, I asked some of these folks about you,
Uh-oh.
and so I want to just share with you a snippet of the things that they said, because I think that it underscores what you said about the people mattering. That he showed an example for me and others to raise the bar in how we dressed, spoke, managed time, anticipated client needs, and how to make a priority of growing in your expertise. Someone else said he exudes class and shaped how I work today. And other person said that how that you made a lasting impression on how young adults should present themselves with excellence and deliver an exceptional experience. Someone else told me that you're the ultimate connector, and it's person after person after person, Jim, have reiterated and said
Wow.
that the impact that you've made on not just young people, but even on people as they grow in their career, on embracing technology, that failing is expected and unavoidable. How do you think about hearing the words of those folks and the realization that you have made that ripple?
Well, it's the most significant part of my career. I don't know. I suppose I've helped raise a couple of $1 billion, and that's meaningful, obviously.
And won some
I,
awards for incredible creative pieces along the way.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, um, means to an end. But what's most rewarding, again, it goes back to people. And I, I I'm that's what means most to me in life, is that I've been able to help people. Now, some of those people are in the clients we serve, and um, we're caring for a lot of people in Ukraine right now through some of our efforts, for example. But um, when we build into others, now we're multiplying, right? And I look at some of the people at RKD that I was blessed to work with. And I don't know, can I name names, or is that?
Go for it. We
No,
might we
I
might
think about,
we might beep them, like we might beep them just to keep the
yeah,
mysterious.
yeah.
Or Ronnie may dub his name over all of them just to be
Just
clear.
over and over again, it'll be my name.
Yeah, whatever works. Well, Amanda Wasson and Billy Vaudry were part of the great class of 1990, and different backgrounds. Amanda came out of Baylor University, and she sort of started at a somewhat menial role, but you could tell from day one this was an exceptional person. And I like to think I've built into her life. She has contributed so much to my life. She absolutely stuns me with the breadth of her brilliance and her ability to come in to a client situation and not only know what to do, but know what's best to do. And but you had an opportunity because it's right out of college. There's not a lot of bad habits formed in terms of our business. And yes, it takes more time, but it's worth it. Again, not you don't have everyone doesn't become an Amanda who is so exceptional, but hopefully we pick out the ones that really do. You got to want to get there too. And I don't mean there in terms of achievement, but in terms of personal growth and professional growth to handle the challenges of meeting human needs like we do. Amanda certainly had it. Billy Vaudry, we didn't need a new writer, but he'd heard about us and he applied. And well, what do you got for your portfolio? He had newspaper clippings from his college newspaper that he'd written. And it obviously had almost or virtually nothing to do with what we were doing, but you could tell he could write. You could tell he had the ability to communicate. And he persisted. I had an associate creative director in those days, but a PhD in Russian. I don't know, that was a weird connection, but he kind of liked Billy and he kept saying, I know we don't need anybody yet, but Billy checked back in. And finally, we had about this much of an opening and said, Billy, would you come join us? Well, it turned out to be a brilliant hire. Didn't know it was brilliant at the time. But again, here's a person that comes with skills, a great family story, and wants to grow and wants to relate to people, and on it goes. Going back further, Tim Kirsten, he wrote me while I was still at Dallas Seminary looking for a new physician. He was in a less than exciting role. I said, well, I'm leaving, but development resources may be hiring. We both ended up there. And for Tim, I've never known anyone who read so voraciously about his craft. He was intense from day one, not in a cold sense, but he was focused. He was purposeful. So conversations with somebody, when you're blessed to have a Tim Kirsten in your life, I mean, you just knew he was going to be great, and he was. And
Jim, you've obviously had a ton of influence on a lot of people throughout your career. I'm curious who in your career influenced you, shaped you, and turned you into the leader you are today.
You know, we all stand on shoulders of somebody else, multiple people often. The myth of the self-made person is really that. We, you know, there's an old book out there called The Turtle on the Fence Post. And you know the old story, if you see a turtle on a fence post, you know he didn't get there by himself. That's certainly me. I had several mentors. My great mentor was the longtime president of Dallas Seminary, and he gave me quite an invitation to a job. Took me to lunch and said, "I'd like you to be my assistant," and it was really related to fundraising. He said, "Frankly, I don't think you can do the job, but my son, who has started agencies in this business and consultant, son has 3 masters and 2 doctorates, smart guy. My son assures me you can do it." Well, you know, I still marvel that I accepted the job. Now, Dr. Walbert and I became close into his 90s at his bedside just 3 days before he died. And we laugh about it over the years. I really said that to you. Yeah, you really said that to me. But I used to go in with copy and it would come out hemorrhaging. I mean, it was just bleeding red ink. And he and his son, his son and I are still good friends. Had lunch yesterday. We had to deal with, occasionally we'd hear, your problem is you're not thinking straight. Now, what's to come back to you're not thinking straight? Yes, I am.
Right. There's no way to
I,
really put you in a
I
corner.
don't know what to do with that,
That's the
So
turtle trying to get off of the fence post at that point.
Yeah, go hide and go underground, go get back in your shell. My goodness. So he was a huge influence. I was blessed with a good undergraduate education. I really felt like I learned how to think at USC, and that was helpful. I wasn't especially close to any one faculty member there because I was very engaged in other leadership activities. But so Dr. Walbert would be it. But then I have to say, I learned from books and reading people a lot smarter than me. Going to seminars. I mean, on the one hand, he's kind of looked at as leadership light, but Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager guy and all the follow on to that, went to seminars of his and gosh, I just had practical things. Ended up meeting Ken some years later, trying to do a video interview. Ken had driven all night from New York to Boston in a cab. He'd been speaking there and he was going to speak at the conference I was a part of in Boston. And so we're doing this interview. I don't remember who we were interviewing, but Ken's laying on the bed snoring away. I mean, just utterly unself-repossessed, but just a wonderful man. Again, a lot of helpful input there. I learned from some of my clients. I've been blessed as you guys have. We're able to serve a lot of really extraordinary people. And I'm always looking back, I'm amazed that some of the people I didn't think I'd like as CEOs, I liked most and became closest to, and some that I thought, gosh, it's going to be great to work for this person, and they were less. So I learned from clients, and then the other thing I would say is I learned from my colleagues. Let's go back to Tim, Amanda, and Billy, just as a quick three. They all have taught me things that I needed to know. Each of them has skills I don't have. And gosh, how blessed can you be? We get to work with people. I get to work with people like you, Justin, for a dozen years. We don't see each other all the time, but your skills, you've got so many skills that I could go to class the rest of my life and not achieve. And Ronnie, I'm stunned by all the things I'm learning about what you've done. You've got skills I don't have. So I think part of it is don't close yourself off to learning. Don't have to be the guru. Be the one who's going to school with whoever is ready to go to school with you, and be grateful for what you can pick up, because I don't bring enough on my own.
Well, Jim, you never know whenever you start these conversations where they're going to go, frankly. And even if you start to line up topics and those sorts of things. And so I want to say thank you for opening up your career and your, sharing these insights. And I can tell you, Ronnie and I have both been challenged and blessed by him today. And I know that our audience is going to be as well.
Well, thank you. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but the privilege is really mine. You guys have enriched my life today, and it helps to look back and think about the people in your life that have brought you here today. I didn't get here alone. One of the things I do with Digizent, and it'll be my parting thought here, is most Fridays, although it's become a part of the culture, I don't have to do it every Friday. I post something in our team chat to remind them, have at least one significant conversation this weekend. If people are most important, we have all the little things. This is a significant conversation. Thank you for this significant conversation. But we need that. If people are most important, let's talk to them. Let's listen to them. Let's get a little bit beyond, how are you? Oh, great, fine. That doesn't carry us to where we need to go, where we want to go. Life is much richer than that, and people are amazing. So thank you. Thank you for the time. Great fun for me, and I'm blessed and privileged to share it with you. Thank you.
You're so welcome, and we appreciate it. If you like this conversation, I think there's nowhere to go but down by listening to any of our other podcast episodes.
I do listen occasionally. You'd be surprised.
I know you send me notes on occasion.
I've got to read Ronnie's post on AI. I just saw that earlier today, so yeah, I got to go there
exactly.
Next.
But there are plenty of other resources available on RKD Group's website, rkdgroup.com, and we'll be sure to tag other episodes that are related to this one. And again, Jim, we appreciate it, man, and we can't wait to see you again. We don't need to have as much time go by next time, okay?
Thank you. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Blessings,
everyone.
guys.
We'll see ya. See ya.